Thank you, Pastor, and good evening, folks. Trust the Lord has been good to you in the last couple of years and has blessed you in your efforts to serve Him. Now, I've been here, I don't know how many times, Pastor. I've shared my most important subjects with you in righteousness by faith. We have talked about the relation of the spirit of prophecy to the Bible. We have talked about the mission of the Adventist Church. So I think you know me pretty well, most of you, and know what I stand for, what I believe, and what I teach. Tonight's message is not going to be a sermon. We'll have those tomorrow. We'll have them in the morning and in the afternoon. Occasionally, I like to do a little reflection and analysis of what I read, what I see, what I am aware of as we go down through the very last years of this Earth's history, particularly within the printed materials that I come across from within the Seventh-Day Adventist Church. So this tonight is going to be my reflections on what I perceive to be the issues facing us today in the Seventh-day Adventist Church. I don't share this in a lot of places. I think you folks know me well enough and know what I believe well enough so that I can share some things with you that I can't share everywhere. And so you'll understand some of the things that I'm going to share with you tonight. As I say, this is not a sermon. I'm going to be sharing some things with you that I have come across. I'm going to start out with a letter that came into Amazing Facts a while back. I'm writing to let you know how extremely blessed I am by Amazing Facts. I'm 20 years old and was raised in the church. I have learned more from you in a month than I've learned in 20 years. My church constantly feeds me milk, and I have become lactose intolerant. I've always longed for deeper biblical truth and am thankful God is using you to help. Young people in my church hardly know any biblical truths, prophecies, or even doctrinal beliefs. In church, we get the usual live right, do good type of sermons. While that has its place, I think we are failing the youth by not teaching them about things like last day events. Now, this little letter I'm sharing with you not to promote Amazing Facts, but to illustrate probably the most serious denominational problem that we have, which is political correctness and neutrality in a time of crisis in which this world needs something more than that. And this was a rather typical kind of letter that I come across. All right, a couple of other things I'll share with you. And as I say, I'm going to be sharing with you things that I have come across in recent years. This was a letter came into the Adventist Review a while back. People in other churches can be friendly and loving. Their music can be beautiful and the sermons inspiring. So if we Adventists think we can attract genuine converts simply by providing them with all these things, good as they are, we are self-deceived. Other churches can give them all these without requiring the sacrifices that come with being an Adventist. The one and only thing that the people cannot obtain at these other churches is the unadulterated truth for these last days. Attempting to compete with the churches of the world and not give them the only thing that makes us special is an exercise in futility. Speaking the truth in love but with conviction, we should be emphasizing rather than minimizing the truths that make us different and distinct. And once again, a little of what might be a problem today in our Seventh-day Adventist Church. We are emphasizing so many of the precious truths of the Bible and sometimes forgetting to emphasize the present truths of the Bible, which is how to get ready for Jesus to come. And we've done a fair share of imitating other churches, a little bit, no, a lot like Israel did when they said, look at all of those things that are happening out in those groves over there. They are praising their God, and they are having people coming in, and we need to have some of that excitement in our churches. We have shared in a little bit of that spirit, I think, a little bit more than we even want to. Another letter that expresses an issue that is worth considering. I faithfully attended an Adventist church for 20 years. When the church received a new pastor, the pastor and the elder board decided to make drastic changes to attract single and married adults without children. Children's programming was practically eliminated, and families were driven from the church, but I held on. I was taught that you don't abandon the church, you work to make changes. I stayed to the detriment of my own children, who were receiving no Bible education other than what I was teaching them at home. Both my children were fed up and wanted to walk away from the Adventist church entirely. At the urging of several of my Christian mentors, I finally admitted that I had done all I could, and we left. It was the hardest thing I've ever done. Many of the people there had become family. We have now joined a new Adventist church with a thriving children's and young adult program. My children, my husband, and I are all involved in the new church, working as leaders. There are times a person has done all they can, and they have to find a church where they can use the gifts God has given them. And that letter illustrates a principle I have long advocated. You stay within a given situation as long as you have influence and the ability to effect change and keep things on track. But there can come a time when it is no longer possible, when the influence is gone, and sometimes drastic changes have to be made for family reasons and for other reasons that are crucial to spiritual survival. I'm going to share with you a survey, a very big survey that was recently done in 2013. This has been called the most extensive research ever conducted on the attitudes, beliefs, experiences, and spiritual practices of Seventh-day Adventists, based on tens of thousands of surveys from around the world. Very interesting findings. First, Sabbath school teachers were ranked higher than pastors and elders when church members were asked to state who was friendlier, warmer, more caring, and had a positive effect on their spiritual lives. And you know, I'm not surprised by that, because this is in the area where you have group communication, interaction, where people can ask questions and share comments. And that underscores the importance. If you are asked to be a Sabbath school teacher or to lead out in a children's division, that may be one of the most important positions in any church, where you can have influence in a very personal, direct way. So I thought I wasn't surprised by that response. But surprisingly, about 3/4 of Adventists strongly embrace the prophetic ministry of Ellen G. White. Now, there's no way of knowing what they really mean by that, but still, to have 3/4 of the people responding to the survey say that they support and embrace strongly embrace the prophetic ministry of Ellen White, that's good news. Glad to hear that. Now, the bad news. Only about 1 in 3 families conduct daily worship. As you know, that's where the spirit of Christian growth is really developed, not in church, but in families together in a regular basis. 1 in 3. Listen to this one. Almost half of college students and recent college graduates said they would accept practicing homosexuals as church members in good and regular standing, which reveals the incredible influence of culture in our church. We think we're separate from culture. No way, no how. Culture has homogenized Adventist understandings of very important issues. Some neutral things: the church is 50% female and 43% male. 54% of the members worldwide are between the ages of 16 and 40. But now listen to this one. When asked if they expect the world to end within the next 20 years, just 22% of the respondents strongly agreed and 45% strongly disagreed. I'm going to read that one again, folks. When asked if they expect the world to end within the next 20 years, 22% strongly agreed, 45% strongly disagreed. And maybe that statistic all by itself may explain why we're having problems in the Seventh-day Adventist Church. We're no longer focused on receiving the seal of God and the close of human probation. We're settling in for the long haul, figuring out how our grandchildren will do once they become the leaders of the Seventh-day Adventist Church. 1 or 2 more. The Adventist World Church has lost at least 1 in 3 Seventh-day Adventist members in the past 50 years. 33%, 1 in 3. In this century, the ratio of people lost versus new converts is 43 per 100. Isn't that incredible? Almost half. Almost half. When the Soviet Union collapsed in 1991, many Adventist groups sponsored large-scale evangelism events, complete with mass choirs and multi-screen presentations. I don't know if some of you were around back then in the 90s to read and hear about all of these huge evangelistic meetings going on after communism broke its hold. Many glowing reports. Many newly baptized converts joined the church thinking it was their ticket to gaining their own wealth. The church in Russia lacked a long-term strategy and denominational infrastructure at that time, and most of those new converts soon stopped attending church. Those numbers were greatly, they didn't even know where the people went. They had no idea of where these people were that were baptized. It's one of the saddest examples of mass baptisms and poor preparation in my lifetime that I've ever come across, what happened in Russia in the 1990s. In one particular division, and I'm reading all of this, by the way, from the Adventist Review, so this is not secret knowledge I'm sharing with you. In one division, 30% of church clerks in one division had been pressured to inflate baptismal numbers. 30% of church clerks. Now I want to share something with you from our current General Conference President, Ted Wilson. And I really do appreciate his appeals, his strength. My love for the church and faithfulness to his word compels me as pastor of the Seventh-day Adventist believers worldwide to share some of my concerns. Here are 4 great concerns for the church today. Number 1, a loss of Seventh-day Adventist identity among some of our pastors and church members. And I think that may be at the root cause of most of the other problems, loss of our identity. What is our purpose? What is our mission? Why are we here? What did God call us for? Too many of our pastors and members have forgotten the divine prophetic calling God has given us as a church. There's a growing tendency to minimize our differences with other denominations. I'm reminded of Ellen White's clear statement, our message is a life and death message, and we are to present it in all its telling force. This leads me to my second concern. That was number 1. The growing influence of worldliness in our churches is alarming. The Apostle John said, if anyone loves the world, the love of the Father is not in him. I'm concerned about the almost overwhelming tide of worldliness that is sweeping into some of our churches. Standards that were once cherished by Seventh-day Adventists in the areas of diet and dress, recreation and amusement, and Sabbath keeping are fast becoming things of the past. This is no time to flirt with the devil's dress, diet, amusement, and worldly influences. This leads me to another concern, the danger of disunity. To discard or ignore mutual agreements violates a sacred trust and creates unnecessary discord. We're right in the middle of that right now. Here is the last of my major concerns, the increased spiritual apathy and complacency prevalent in the lives of many. The prophet of God could not make it clearer when writing, where there is no active labor for others, love wanes and faith grows dim. 4 major concerns from the world leader of the Seventh-day Adventist Church on this point. And I've been impressed in recent years that as important as our doctrines are, as important as our gospel is, and you know what I say about that, our gospel is the unique treasure of the Seventh-day Adventist Church. There is something even more important than our doctrines and our gospel, and that is our understanding of why we exist as a remnant church, why we were called into existence. In other words, very simply, our mission, our purpose, our calling. There are some things that have to happen before Jesus can come. And I believe that that is the heart and soul of why we exist as a Seventh-day Adventist Church. And when we lose this, we lose just about everything. So what I'm going to share with you right now is statements from two General Conference presidents, because this doesn't just include the local churches and the local members, but leaders of the church. Jan Paulsen, the previous General Conference president, wrote a book called Where Are We Going? And he said this in his book: both victory and defeat will be our companions until we reach the end of our journey. Did you hear that? Both victory and defeat. That, my friends, is the heart of the evangelical gospel. You'll have your ups, you'll have your downs, and it'll stay that way till Jesus comes. And this perspective will forever prevent us from achieving our purpose and our mission in Seventh-day Adventism. The question is, what does God expect of us today as individuals and as a community of believers? It's only when we're clear about the answer to this question that revival and reformation becomes something more than words and a slogan. And I agree. We have to have more than just a slogan and say it's revival. At a private supper Jesus had with the disciples, he said to them, "You are to be my witnesses. Make disciples of them." That is our all-encompassing, overriding assignment. The church has no other mission. Those are his words. The church has no other mission. That is the evangelical mission, evangelical Christianity. That is all what all conservative churches have, is to win souls, to baptize, to reach hearts, to do world mission. No understanding here of Adventist purpose and reason for existence. He concluded, being faithful to our God-given mission is our goal. All of our energies and resources should be focused on that. We must not allow anything to distract us. It is to fulfill this mission that we exist as a people. All of those are exactly the right words, except he has the wrong mission. He has the wrong idea of what the mission of the Seventh-day Adventist Church really is. Now, from our current president, Elder Ted Wilson. And again, you know how much I appreciate him and his emphasis on revival and reformation. But even here is a major blind spot. This mission continues today with God's remnant people, the Seventh-day Adventist Church. Without question, the sole purpose of the church's existence is to carry the gospel to the world. The sole purpose of the church's existence is to carry the gospel to the world. Tragically, we have replaced the primary mission of the church with the secondary mission of the church, which makes it appear that we're on track. Our secondary mission is to reach every soul that we can with the message of salvation through Jesus Christ. That is what God told every disciple, Jesus told every disciple of his to the very end of time. But this has been the mission of the Christian church from its very beginning. It has been no different in the first century, the 10th century, or our century. It has always been the mission of the church. God called the remnant, the last group of people that he would call his own on this earth, at a very specific time in earth's history, meaning that Jesus could come almost immediately after that time period. There didn't need to be 150 years. He called this movement into existence to finish things up. And I'm going to suggest that means dealing with Satan's very last challenge to God's plan and the leadership that God is giving throughout the earth. Can sinners with fallen natures really obey God 100% of the time? That's the challenge. Can sinners with fallen natures really obey God 100% of the time? Can they keep the commandments of God with the heavenly sanctuary closed and Satan throwing everything he can at them to get them to slip? Can they really do that? Satan says it's impossible. God says, I will do it. Can they really be taken alive to heaven with the same characters that they have developed here on earth without missing a beat? Walk right into heaven with the same character that they have developed here on earth. So, I think our primary mission is simple: to allow the gospel to so transform our lives so that we can receive the seal of God and experience the latter rain. That's why God called the Seventh-Day Adventist Church into existence. Transformation, proving God's way really works. So God can close human probation and let the watching universe see who's telling the truth. Is God telling the truth, or is Satan telling the truth about human beings with fallen natures? Who is lying? Who's telling the truth? The final battle between God and Satan in the lives of the 144,000 who live at this very last time period as final proof that God is handling the sin problem correctly. Because if it's all forgiveness, Satan wins, because there is no real change, and God will have to forgive people in heaven too. But if it is forgiveness and transformation into total loyalty to God, then God wins and His way works and the universe is secure. That's what it's about. All right, to put it simply, if we receive the seal of God and demonstrate that God is telling the truth, our mission is completed. We have finished the work. On the other hand, if we continue to do what the secondary mission says is our mission, to take the gospel to the world, baptize 10 more million, 20 more million people, and do not receive the seal of God in the process, we have totally failed in what God called this remnant church to do and be. That's the primary versus the secondary mission. They're not opposites by any means. Both work together. But if we do not have our primary mission in focus, our secondary mission can't do it. It can't provide what the primary mission of the Seventh-day Adventist Church is. So that's really my major burden tonight that I wanted to share with you, that we better get our mission straight in the Seventh-day Adventist Church. Even if our gospel is straight, even if our doctrines are straight, even if our prophecy is straight, if our mission isn't clear, we spin like a hamster in a wheel and go nowhere and accomplish nothing. And we praise ourselves for all the good reports. I just heard about 100,000 baptisms in Rwanda. Praise God for that. I hope they're real and I hope they're sincere. But that, again, is not our primary mission. Sometimes people think that those who stand boldly in defense of the right and the truth lack piety and a Christian spirit. I came across this in Testimonies, Volume 3, pages 293 to 304, in a chapter entitled Moses and Aaron. Moses and Aaron. Had Aaron stood unwaveringly for truth, for God, had he told them that he would not, at the sacrifice of his life, yield to their entreaties, he would have had influence with the people to prevent a terrible apostasy. Aaron's, now listen carefully, Aaron's calm assurance in a wrong course gave him greater influence with the people than Moses could have had in leading them in a right course and in subduing their rebellion. Aaron was much more attractive to the people. They thought, if Moses had only been as amiable and mild as Aaron, what peace and harmony would have prevailed in the camp of Israel. When Moses saw the idolatry of Israel, he threw down the tables of stone and broke them. Aaron stood meekly by, bearing the censure of Moses with commendable patience. The people were charmed with Aaron's lovely spirit and were disgusted with the rashness of Moses. How about that for an analysis of what really was happening? Many professed Christians look upon men who do not reprove and condemn wrong as men of piety and Christians indeed, while they think that those who stand boldly in defense of the right and will not yield their integrity to unconsecrated influences lack piety and a Christian spirit. Aaron's course in giving influence to wrong and sin in Israel cost the lives of 3,000 men. Once again, what is our mission? What is our purpose? Why are we giving our message to a world in need? All right. The rest of the time, that's really kind of the main part of what I wanted to share with you tonight. The rest of the time, I'm going to share little things from here and there that may not be totally connected. And remember, this is not a sermon tonight. This is a sharing time tonight that I'm doing with you. I came across a letter on modesty. An important question to ask is, whom am I wanting to please? When the answer is my Heavenly Father, modesty will follow a higher standard in behavior, appearance, conversation, and dress, whether for church, home, or work. Who are we trying to please? Who are we trying to impress? That's a very big question we need to ask ourselves. With my clothes, with my actions, with my words. Here was an outstanding letter. Females have their hardest intergender test in female modesty, other-centered protective behavior, meaning, am I my brother's keeper? Taking the sensual out of beauty, while males experience their hardest intergender test in rejecting lust, a feat truly done only by looking on a woman as a precious child of God, whose life, temporal and eternal, is to be protected and inspired by them. That is a good letter. The female test, don't put any stumbling blocks in the way of us weak men. We have a tough enough time. Don't make it harder for us. The male test, replacing lust with love, agape love, the true love, the principal love. Both of those are tests that are very important for each one of us. How about one on family worship? Joe Wheeler wrote this. Some of you might have read some of his books. When he uses the term story hour, he's referring to family worship. What is happening today is that Christian Adventist parents have surrendered to the electronic media and have made it the pulpit in their homes. They no longer spend time with their children each day. They no longer have sacrosanct story time in which they can talk about values with their children while they're growing up. One of the things Connie and I discovered all too soon is that you turn around once and your children have gone on to other mentors and your chance to make a difference in their lives is over. It seems to me that if we as a church could make the story hour central in the lives of our children again and be with them as they explore the day-to-day values that they are going to live by, we could revolutionize Adventism through that one simple method. And you know, he may be right. Maybe it doesn't take complicated seminars and parenting seminars. Maybe it just takes simple families coming together morning and evening and praying together. Our editor of the Inside Report in Amazing Facts is Anthony Lester. He's a young man, and he wrote this. The idea that our church is failing our youth because we aren't hip enough just isn't true. My point is to end the argument that young people will leave a church simply because it doesn't play to their particular cultural tastes. We might as well say that if Jesus had only been accompanied by a slick beat, the rich young ruler would have had a totally different reaction to him. Sometimes, no matter how we present the message, it will be rejected because Satan has convinced others that the cost is too high. Hiding the hard sale of Christianity behind a veneer of slick music isn't going to help anything. What will convince young people and old people to follow Christ is our agape love, the Bible truth, and the absence of hypocrisy in our lives. Those are really three important principles. Agape love is the first, Bible truth, and the absence of hypocrisy in our lives. That's what drives, I'm afraid, a number of young people away. They observe that distinct difference between what we preach and what we do. A few more statistics on this in this area. Approximately 60% to 70% of young Adventists are leaving the church within the North American division, and the rate of young adult attrition may have risen by as much as 20% since the end of the 1990s. What they're saying is getting worse. 20% more now. To label this issue as a problem may be an understatement, given that over 60% of the post-collegiate demographic may soon be disappearing from Adventist churches. It may be more accurate to label this a congregational crisis. So my friends, Is it important right now to do whatever you can to support groups like GYC, Generation of Youth for Christ? Support them with your prayers, support them with your money, support them with your encouragement. Encourage every young person you know to go there, be there, participate. How about our self-supporting schools? To give people advice and help as they're wondering where to send their children to schools. Do we need to become more proactive here to prevent this 60 to 70% loss of our young people from Adventism? A recent Pacific Union College graduate was interviewed. She was asked, how did you find a church home after graduation? She said, I moved to Loma Linda for my bachelor's degree in nursing. Fortunately, I had some friends who invited me to attend their church, Advent Hope. If you haven't heard of that, that's the group in Loma Linda that was formed a number of years ago in the Loma Linda University area, which is just an outstanding group of young people, let me tell you. I have just been so happy to meet with them on many occasions. So that's where she went. Now listen. At the time, I was church hopping. However, since my friends kept inviting me to help out with music, I eventually settled on attending Advent Hope. I initially did not feel comfortable because I thought the sermons were too fundamental for my taste. Honestly, the problem was not the church or its doctrines. The problem was with my viewpoint. What was the problem? Her college experience that she had participated in, whether with friends or whatever else, had created a prejudice against hearing clear, distinct Adventist truths and doctrines, but was overcome because of good friends. How important are good friends for any young person that is trying to find their way, or for older as well? Okay, something else I want to share with you. Like I said, this is kind of disconnected, but I think there are some important things to share now and then. Absolute truths. There's a lot of things today that's going around. There are no absolute truths. It's all relative. It depends on your viewpoint. Your viewpoint is as good as any other's. Absolute truths. Cliff Goldstein wrote an article in the review, said, it's one thing for secular thinkers to argue that truth is relative, contingent, cultural, but to have Christians spout similar sentiments? Yet, how can lies exist without truth? How about 2 plus 2 equals 31.7? A lie? But why? Because we know that 2 plus 2 equals 4. Thus, 4 is the truth that makes the first statement false. Most would agree that the statement, the torture of babies is morally justified, is wrong. Okay, most of them would agree that that's a wrong statement. But they presuppose that truth must exist behind it, which is that it's not morally justified to torture babies. How could any position on any subject be a lie or an error without the truths that make lies lies and errors errors? In other words, how could there be any untruth? How could there be any error if there was not truth that the lie is contradicting? Lies cannot exist without truth. So, I just want to kind of share some ways in which lies clamp themselves onto truth in our times. This one is another column in the Adventist Review done by Andy Nash. It was entitled, No One Close, the Finest Adventist Author. Of all the Adventist authors I've known and read, one stands far above the rest. A girl with a third-grade education, with 19th century limitations, yet with the incredible designation of being the most translated American author in history. Ellen White is different. She had a special line to God. Great article, all truth and all praise. But wait, Ellen White's work is not scripture. She grew in her understanding of the grace and love of God, which is true, by the way. Prophets grow too. It's okay to disagree with her, to point out her mistakes. It's okay to limit her counsel. Those who read only Ellen White tend to be troubled people. Wow. How about that article all in one page? Now, that article got some letters, and I'm glad that letters come in now and then. Listen, The title of Andy Nash's article, "No One Close, the Finest Adventist Author," was attractive. I was eager to read it. But alas, what a shocking realization it was to find the article that seemed to praise Ellen White's writings was in reality destroying any credibility of her being inspired by the Holy Spirit. The article stated it's okay to disagree with her, to point out her mistakes. It's okay to limit her counsel. Those who read only Ellen White tend to be troubled people. Are there really people who read only Ellen White? Studies prove that those who read White spend more time reading the Bible compared to those who do not read Ellen White. Notice what she wrote about her own writings. The very last deception of Satan will be to make of none effect the testimony of the Spirit of God. And do you know what making of none effect is? It does not mean to deny. It does not mean to burn books. Making of none effect means to praise while disagreeing with what is said. That's making of none effect. Just like Bible scholars praise the Bible while saying most of it really isn't true. Genesis 1 to 7, no way. But they praise the Bible and want us to read the Bible. That's making of none effect. Oh, that was one letter. Here's another one. Once we determine that a prophet or messenger is from God, we then have to believe that the messages which are attributed as coming from God are from God. If they are from God, then they cannot be of less importance than those of the former prophets. God doesn't deliver two different levels of messages. So, the truth, Ellen White was inspired as a mouthpiece of God. The lie, we can disagree with her. We can point out her mistakes. We can limit her counsel because she was only a human being after all. Another one. This was entitled Big Picture Theology. The introduction to the fundamental beliefs says Adventists confess the Bible alone is our rule for faith and life. Now here's what the author of this article says. Biblical truths are timeless. However, the circumstances and the thinking and behavior of people change with time. Biblical teachings can therefore meet the requirements of time, having a different focus or a different level of importance. There is room for necessary changes in the understanding of its teachings. So what did we just hear there? The truth, biblical truths are timeless. And then the lie, biblical truths can be changed due to different circumstances. Wow, all put together in one page once again. Here's another. For many years, this is a letter that came in. For many years, membership in the church was based on a public acceptance of the 13 baptismal vows. The 11th stated, "Do you know and understand the fundamental Bible principles as taught by the Seventh-Day Adventist Church, ordering your life in harmony with these principles?" The vow did not require the member to believe in the fundamental beliefs. He only had to know and understand them and follow the external practices. So, the truth, baptism is based on agreement with our fundamental beliefs of the Seventh-day Adventist Church. And the lie, you can be baptized if you understand and outwardly comply with those even if you don't believe them. Wow. If that isn't hypocrisy of the highest order, I don't know what is. You understand them, you practice them, you don't have to believe them. And I'm afraid that's happening as well. Some letters. I am writing in regard to Chris Blake's article, "In Christ There Is Neither Conservative Nor Liberal." Two opposing theologies cannot be correct. Revelation 3 makes it very clear that a large portion of the Laodicean church has a theology that gives them a false assurance of salvation. The fact remains, no matter how one labels them, some things are non-negotiable. Many of our doctrines, including some of the original pillars of our faith, are being attacked from within the church. There can be no compromise on these issues. If it was present truth 100 years ago, it can't be false today. New truth does not negate or contradict old truth. There is still truth and error. There can never be any compromise between the two, whether or not one wants to label any particular issue conservative or liberal. I thought a good letter. Here's another one. May I suggest that it is quite appropriate to seek to move beyond labels in our conversation. Again, conservative and liberal are not good labels. But there is a set of real issues that are the basis of the differences that arise in any church community. Liberal and conservative are very crude labels, but they reflect some fundamental differences in approach and assumptions held. The Word of God is simple and for all times. We call that conservative. Many Christians like to change the rules and commandments of God and make us ecumenical, easier, more popular, and less firm in our principles. That is what we call progressive. Well, interesting, I thought. Good quality of letters coming into our papers. All right, let's see what else. Okay, you know what? The issue of homosexuality is probably the most, what's the right word to say? The biggest issue that has ever faced the world in my lifetime. And it is probably the issue that will destroy religious liberty in the United States of America, all by itself. This is a huge, huge issue right now throughout the world. And I came across a very insightful article, again in the Adventist Review, by Wayne Blakely. Some of you may know about his ministry. For many years, I wasn't spending time in communion with God, His Word, and conversation with Him. I blamed Him. I was mad at Him, even when I didn't know Him. I can count, now listen to this one, and remember his ministry is dedicated to bringing people to a better relationship personally and spiritually on this issue. I can count on both hands the number of people I know who have accepted God's redemption from homosexuality. And He's been doing this a long time. Satan will focus our minds on sexual practices rather than allow us to realize that the vital issue is completely independent of sexual orientation. Real redemption does not come from modifying sexual appetites. Exchanging one sexual appetite for another is not the same as coming to Christ. My life was severely broken, but it ran far deeper than sex. The solution regarding sin applies to homosexuality as surely as it does for any other temptation or activity condemned by God. The miracle homosexuals need is the miracles all sinners need: surrender, letting self go, and humbly accepting God's plan instead of our own. So as we journey and struggle together, let us encourage one another as we testify of overcoming grace. Let none abandon Jesus for the cries of our flesh, whatever crosses we may bear. And once again, I think that's crucial. It is not about just changing one's, shall we say, nature, because with Satan's manipulation of our world and our genetics and everything else, he has done a masterful job of messing human beings up. It is surrender of everything that is not in harmony with God's will. And that can apply to anyone on any issue. That's the real issue. I thought he hit it exactly right. I found a really neat article on prenatal influence. Just over a century ago, Ellen White wrote the book Health or How to Live, and she said, "The irritability, nervousness, and despondency manifested by the mother will mark the character of the child." That was a pretty bold statement in her time. In 1954, Ashley Montague would say, "There is now sufficient evidence from many sources to indicate that the unborn child can be variously affected by physical changes in the mother. It is largely up to her and to those surrounding her during her pregnancy whether her infant will be born a happy, healthy, sweet-tempered individual or an ill-adjusted neurotic." How about that? That's a pretty interesting conclusion there. Largely up to her and to those surrounding her, whether that child will have a sweet temper or a neurotic start in life. Ellen White said again, "Many children have received as a birthright almost unconquerable tendencies to evil." Almost unconquerable tendencies to evil. But if the mother is temperate and self-denying, if she is kind, gentle, and unselfish, she may give her children these same precious traits of character. Oh, pray for the young mothers and the young families that are really facing the critical issues with raising children in this day and age in which we live. Well, those are some of the things I wanted to share with you tonight. As I say, not a sermon, sharing time. The issue of particularly what is the mission of the church, what is our purpose, why are we here, how will we finish the work, how will that happen, becoming the crucial area. So I've addressed some issues in the church that are problems. I'm going to finish by reminding us that God is still in charge and He is still powerful. My mother's father worked as a carpenter. On this particular day, he was building some crates for the clothes his church was sending to orphanages in China. On his way home, he reached into his shirt pocket to find his glasses, but they were gone. When he mentally replayed his earlier actions, he realized what had happened. The glasses had slipped out of his pocket unnoticed and fallen into one of the crates which he had nailed shut. His brand new glasses were heading for China. The Great Depression was at its height, and Grandpa had 6 children. He had spent $20 for those glasses that very morning. It's not fair, he told God as he drove home in frustration. I've been very faithful in giving my time and money to your work, and now this. Months later, the director of the orphanage was on furlough in the United States. He came to speak one week at my grandfather's small church in Chicago. The missionary began by thanking the people for their faithfulness in supporting the orphanage. But most of all, he said, I must thank you for the glasses you sent last year. You see, the communists had just swept through the orphanage, destroying everything, including my glasses. I was desperate. Even if I had the money, there was simply no way of replacing those glasses. Along with not being able to see well, I experienced headaches every day. So my co-workers and I were much in prayer about this. Then your crates arrived. When my staff removed the covers, they found a pair of glasses lying right on top. Folks, when I tried on the glasses, it was as though they had been custom made just for me. I want to thank you for being a part of that. And the people listened. They were happy. That was a nice story about miraculous glasses. But the missionary must have confused their church with some other church that had sent those glasses. There were no glasses on their list of items to be sent to China. But sitting quietly in the back, with tears streaming down his face, an ordinary carpenter realized the master carpenter had used him in an extraordinary way. How about that story? Things that we don't even know, that we get frustrated about, maybe the Lord can use in miraculous ways. One more story, okay? For many years, church had not been a part of my life. I had been raised in an Adventist home, attended church school, and been baptized at an early age. When I was 18, I left home, left town, and left my previous life. I made lots of bad choices, even spent time in jail. But now, I was happily married and enjoying life. I liked going for walks, especially the loop by the Grays River. On one of these treasured walks, I kept noticing a huge rock about halfway up a long driveway, but never walked up to get a closer look. My curiosity finally got the best of me, and I walked up the driveway to investigate. What I saw surprised me. It was an engraving on the rock, a Bible quote that read, "But they that wait upon the Lord shall renew their strength. They shall mount up with wings as eagles. They shall run and not be weary, and they shall walk and not faint." Engraved along with the words was a picture of a soaring eagle. It touched my heart, and I decided to read it from my own Bible. I felt as if God was speaking to me, calling me back to His house of worship. Soon after, I felt impressed to look for the local Adventist church. About 2 weeks later, with much apprehension, I finally opened the door of the Catholic Seventh-Day Adventist Church. I couldn't believe my eyes when I looked at the banner hanging on the rostrum near the pulpit. My text was there, the quote from Isaiah 40:31, complete with a soaring eagle. I felt as though I had truly come home. After church, I mentioned the banner to the pastor and asked how long it had been hanging there. His reply startled me. My wife hung it there a couple weeks ago. It was just about the time I saw it carved on the rock. Some time passed before I had an opportunity to again walk the Grays River Loop. I was eager to see the rock that had started the wonderful change in my life. I walked up the driveway with great anticipation. But I was in for another surprise. The rock had other Bible texts, but my text in Isaiah was nowhere to be seen. Even the beautiful soaring eagle had been erased. I eventually talked to the woman who lived at the farmhouse at the end of the long driveway. She told me that her husband had the stone put there with Bible verses and a cross, not an eagle. Did you cover the original Isaiah text? How were you able to do that when it had been engraved with so much detail? I asked. She looked at me astonished. The rock is as it has always been. The text you mentioned was never there. But it was there. The Lord had put it there just for me. If God can engrave 10 commandments on 2 tablets of stone, he can engrave a special text to lead a wayward child back home. Amazing story. What God can do if a person is willing. Does our God still work miracles? Can he work those miracles for the church as well as for individuals? So with everything I've shared tonight, let's not get in the business of pointing fingers. Let's just get in the business of getting our lives right and understanding our mission and living our lives in harmony with God's will. So the church can succeed in its real mission, receiving the seal of God, the latter rain, and standing for him during the 7 last plagues of this earth's tormented history. May God help us to be that people. Right here, you and I can be part of that multitude, that 144,000 that God is calling. We can be part of it. Let's kneel together as we close tonight.